It's football and other F words, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, coming to your computers, to your telephones, whatever you're using to watch us. Maybe you're even watching us on the big screen like you want to do. I'm Zach Lyons. You follow me on X at FWordsPod. He's Mike Herndon. You can follow him on X at Mike Herndon NFL.
The logos still aren't changed.
Logos not changed.
So I think we should still have to call it Twitter until you change the logos.
Can't do it. Just I just haven't been able to get there yet. But we're going to be talking all about the Titans roster. We got so much to get to. But first, Bluegrass Beverages, our sponsor, Hendersonville, Tennessee, celebrating their 50th anniversary of being open this Saturday. There's going to be food trucks from 12 to 4, food trucks. There's going to be breweries. Come out and have some fun. It's free, so come out and join. Come see me and Stoney as we do a special prediction live podcast there at Bluegrass Beverages. It'll be me and Stoney who's filling in for Mike because Mike he's moving to Austin, so he's moved on from all of his friends in Tennessee. He hates us, and he does not want to hang out with us. So that is what is happening there.
Not accurate. Saying goodbye to my family.
Listen, Mike thinks so highly of himself that he's going to be by Sunday up to 3 different goodbye parties because I'm counting the fantasy football draft goodbye parties. So like he's got the fantasy football league. He's got to say goodbye to the family. And then there's like I'm not going to tell the location because I don't want any of you guys creepers showing up. But there's also a second, kind of like, I guess maybe friends and spouses, I guess you could call it. But
yeah,
lots of going away parties for Mike here.
Oh, I've been
You're not going off the war.
Been here a long time, going back. So.
Okay, so the first question on everybody's mind, because there's a lot of news with the Titans roster coming down, and I have a personal question. No, not a personal question, but I have a question personally for you.
All right.
Where and why did all of this Tyree Phillips love come from when he got cut from the Giants? And everybody, I mean, every time I think it originated with like a Titans fanalist account or something.
I thought it was Tehran. Tehran put out something about they needed to go check.
And maybe it was Tehran. I don't.
Tires.
Kick the tires on a guy who spells his name like tires. Yeah. Who happens to be a tire fire of a right tackle who has never played a full season. He's been on the IR multiple times, IR list. And we're talking like he's allowed 16 total pressures, including 6 sacks on 208 pass blocking snaps. That's not good.
Not good.
So why did all of these Titans fans come in my mentions? I was like, oh, who do you want them to claim? And what's the corresponding move? And everybody's like, oh, we got to get Tyree Phillips. Why? Like, he is not better than Chris Hubbard, and that is saying something.
I think the Tyree Phillips thing probably comes from, one, he's an SEC offensive tackle.
Oh, well, then stop right there. I understand now.
Yeah. So, and this team needs offensive tackles. So I think it's a connecting of the dots there.
Kenneth comes in to the mentions, and surprisingly enough, I guess he didn't read my tweet where I said, never been more happy to be wrong. Never been happier to be wrong that Caleb Murphy's on the team because I was rooting for Caleb Murphy. But before we get into all the player moves, I want to talk about your feelings towards Rand Carthon and / Mike Vrabel in this this offseason, but also with how they kept the 53. Because to me, this is a definitive and glaring difference in answer to who was responsible for the 53 under John Robinson. Because I feel like this is a totally different approach in who they kept, why they kept, and what those people bring versus what they've kept over the last previous years. And also who they've signed after, who they've claimed and who they've signed after all this. I feel like it's a refreshing way to look at because they are balancing doing a good balancing act of veteran presence, reliability, and upside. And I feel like that has not been the case. It's always veteran responsibility. And as long as we got 53 veterans, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to like know how to read too much into that just based on the fact that like this roster and the salary cap situation and everything else that Carthon inherited was different than what it had been for most of the John Robinson era, right? Like he was pretty cap strapped. Like we knew they were gonna have to have some
By his
like
own design.
well, yeah, by John Robinson's design, right? Like
Yeah.
so Carthon kind of inherited that mess and has had to deal with it. And look, he's got a lot of UDFAs on this roster, which I think is not. It's a pretty clear indication that like what we've been talking about all summer with the depth on this team, that it's a concern is a concern because you know the other teams that have a lot of UDFAs and like rookies on their rosters, the Rams, the Bucks, the other rosters that are generally considered like some of the worst in the NFL right now. So I think it's
But they didn't have to do this. That's what I'm saying. Because let's take the example of Caleb Murphy. If this was a John Robinson roster, he would not have made this team. Because we have seen Caleb Murphy's come and go for this team that had upside, and they had holes on the roster to fill at that spot. And I would have think that you would see like Anthony Kendall probably wouldn't have made this team. You know, those guys that made this team, I just don't feel like would have been here if it was John Robinson.
Possibly. Yeah, it's I mean, it's definitely a new direction. I like what they've done with the roster overall because like I just said, that they did come in with some constraints. They didn't spend a ton of money. They didn't kick a ton of cans down the road financially. I mean, they minimally restructured deals for the most part. They have done some void years and stuff like that, but that's pretty much standard practice in the NFL at this point. So they have definitely they've put themselves in a situation where next year they're going to have significant cap space, especially if they don't end up bringing back Ryan Tannehill, which I wouldn't expect them to do at this point. I think they're going to roll with the young guys. Really, unless it's just a total disaster behind the scenes at this point. Like, right? Isn't that kind of how you feel that they're moving on after this year? I mean,
from Ryan Tannehill,
yeah. Unless Levis and Willis are just really bad, and they're just like, and
there's a high percentage chance that is going to be the case. Like, I mean, to me, it's a better than average chance right now until they actually pull the trigger. That I am not ready to say that Will Levis and Malik Willis, because like we're not there behind the scenes, right? So like to me, if they were placing betting odd favorites, whether it was going to be one of Will Levis or Malik Willis or Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback in 2024, not doing the field or the another veteran quarterback, I think it would be like minus 360 in favor of Ryan Tannehill being back. Like, yeah, I don't think it's as close as what you're trying to paint it out to be. No,
I would take the other side of that, to be honest with you. I think they've set all this up so that they can reset the cap next year and build around one of those young guys.
And that would be great. I mean, if they could, but I mean, there's because of Will Levis's injuries. My feeling is at this point is that like they'll know, but we don't know. Like that's the thing. We won't know until it happens.
Yeah.
So if like right now, if I'm going to stay true to my word and my belief that Will Levis is not very good and Malik Willis is not very good, then I'm going to be siding with the Ryan Tannehill until we get some kind of sign otherwise that one of these guys could be the future franchise quarterback. So like I'm not as confident in the opinion of like, to me right now, if I was setting like percentages, 75% Ryan Tannehill's back or a veteran, but like 75%. It's basically, it's not one of those other guys.
I think I'm like 60-40 that it's one of the young guys.
Yeah. So you're thinking 60% is gonna be one of the young guys.
Yeah. So I'm on the other side of that, but yeah, I think that's kind of the background for all of this too, is like how he's treated the cap, how he's treated the season. It's clear they want to compete this year. They went out and got Hopkins. Obviously the retooling of the roster, and we can talk about Trevis Gipson and Kendall Vildor, later, but it's. They've definitely built out a better roster than what I thought they'd be able to, given the resources that they had available to them. There's still some depth problems for sure. And like I said, keeping 5 UDFAs is not a great sign for the roster. Now, it's a good sign that maybe your scouting staff turned up some good, hidden gems potentially. Like, I don't know if Anthony Kendall's ever going to be anything for this roster. I don't know if Matthew Jackson is ever going to be anything more than a special teams guy. But I think Caleb Murphy has potential. I think Kearis Jackson has potential to kind of earn roles long term on the defense. Or on the defense or the offense. I think they've got some guys that are very interesting from a UDFA standpoint. And in the practice squad, I like too. I like a lot of the guys that they brought back. And think they've really refreshed a lot of it too, because there's some Mason Kinseys and Sam Aquanu holdovers, and Jordan Roos, I think, is back on the practice squad, but probably 75% of the practice squad is new, guys that were not with the team last year. So it's definitely a big turnover from year to year compared to last year.
Well, there's definitely were a lot of surprises. I did my count. I think I was at 4. I'm counting Michael Badgley's exit and a veteran as a half, because I knew that Michael Badgley was going to be on the roster at week 1, but I thought they may be carry him. But I knew they were going to replace him somewhere.
Do I get credit for putting not Michael Badgley?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was down to 43 and a half. So that is 5 worse than what I was last year, which is a sign that this is, to me, is it was a different approach to building the roster for the Tennessee Titans than we've seen in the past, because normally you could kind of predict it anyway. I don't know where you ended up.
I don't think I've counted mine yet. I was actually going back to try to find it. I know I've missed several. I missed
there was some shocking. So I want to go through my list of biggest surprises in order before we get into the roster makeup itself and get your thoughts. I thought the most surprising one myself, in order, keeping Rice and Otis. So it's both of them. I'm not terribly surprised that Otis made it, but I'm really shocked that both of those guys made it over some of the Flip Cup boys, the Crackerbacks. Cutting Guerrer is number 2. Number 3 was keeping Matt Jackson. Number 4 was cutting Chance Campbell. Cutting both Odukoye and Raider. Cutting both Aquanu and Rush. And keeping Naquan and cutting the rest but Peavy. Obviously Peavy made it, but neither of us are surprised. Where do you fall on, let's put in the linebackers all in one thing. So where do you fall on Rice, Otis, and Chance Campbell, and how that inside linebacking room played out? And are you surprised they didn't make a play for any linebackers so far off the waivers, or that were vested veterans that were released?
Yeah, so I just counted up. I missed 7, so I had 46 out of 53.
Which is not bad.
Yeah. But yeah, the linebackers were surprised, because I thought Campbell was closer to linebacker 3, inside linebacker 3, than he was to the bubble. So that one was a pretty big surprise. That was probably the biggest surprise as far as the guys that missed the cut. And look, maybe I should have been more on the Otis Reese thing, just based on Vrabel practically
But he didn't do anything in the game.
He didn't. Yeah, that's the thing. He did nothing in the preseason. So this is all based off of tape, practice, all this other stuff that they evaluated this off of. Which is why I always mention it. We do get to see preseason games, but we shouldn't overrate them, because that's maybe 10% of the evaluation of these guys overall is what they do in the preseason games. The rest is all, a bunch of practices that occur not only in training camp, but over the summer.
But then
all the
on the
time
flip
in the
side, you got
weight
Reggie
room, all the
Roberson,
time in
right?
the classroom.
Then you have Reggie Roberson, who did everything you said, but he wasn't good at the 10%. It's just,
yeah, but we don't know how these.
Yeah.
We don't know who these guys are in the weight room, the classroom, like stuff like that. Like there could be other stuff that, I mean, I'm always very cognizant of the fact that like we don't see like the full evaluation picture that they do. Which is why I'm always like, you got to take some of the preseason stuff. Although, look, there is something to the fact that like, hey, you're doing it in a game situation that matters. And that's why I do think Caleb Murphy getting 4 sacks and continuing, like, if Caleb Murphy had 4 sacks, but he hadn't put up 25 and a half sacks in his final year in college, I might not have been as like, okay, he's got to make the team as I was. But when you've got college production and you turn around and jump up to, and look, like, he wasn't going against Trent Williams, right? He was going against second, third string tackles, but it's still a huge jump up from Division II. I think, yeah, he's Division II,
whatever
right?
community college he went to.
It's still a huge jump up from Ferris State in their competition. So for him to continue that production against much, much better players tells me like, yeah, there's something there that should be developed. So I think you have to kind of like pick and choose, and maybe it's bias driven or something to some degree, but I do think you have to kind of pick and choose what is important from the preseason and what is not.
But why keep Rice? Okay, so
yeah, I don't know.
So Monty Rice, he puts out that weird quote to John Glennon.
Oh my god!
Oh my gosh!
And life today, and God or something.
Well, yeah. And then today, Mike Vrabel's asked about it, and Mike Vrabel alludes to the fact that it was injury related.
Right.
So is Monty Rice is lying while also praising and talking about God in his life? I mean, what is going on with Monty Rice, and why are they continuing to keep him? Because to me, like, I get it with Otis. I mean, you saw it with Jack Gibbons and Dylan Cole. They love these little scrappers that will only be able to go. I don't know why I'm being told about Starfield reviews. I don't know anything about Starfield. Anyway, I don't understand this Monty Rice thing, and I don't understand why he's continuing to get these chances while also, like, you're praising a guy like Otis and giving him a shot. But Chance Campbell, who was there all offseason long, who has shown last year in preseason games, this year in preseason games, that he's much closer to being developed than some of these other linebackers that they kept, like Otis Reese. And then you're going to keep a guy that doesn't stay healthy, that is weirdly just quoting stuff that doesn't make any sense. And I don't get it. Like, that is the thing to me that has been so confusing about this roster. Like, I like the roster. I like how it ended up. I like that they're doing, a little bit of upside over, the veterans like Okwonu or Thomas Rush and stuff like that. I like it, but I don't understand all their choices. And this is the one I just can't get over. I just have no clue why Monty Rice is still on this team. And it's odd. It's just odd to me.
I think they do like Monty Rice's ability, from the fact of
what ability?
He's a sideline to sideline linebacker. He's physical. He does a lot of the
show
things.
It sometime in an NFL game.
He does a lot of the things that they like, that Mike Vrabel likes. Now, look, he can't stay healthy. And I think he was lying about the injury, frankly, because he may have been worried that if he did get cut, that he wouldn't be picked up by another team if they knew he was hurt again, because he's always hurt. He's always been hurt going back to like his freshman year at Georgia. So look, this is only a matter of time before he's hurt again, in my opinion. And then, maybe he'll be off the roster at that point. So I think his days are relatively numbered, especially if he cannot pass Jack Gibbons for that inside linebacker spot at some point during the season, I think we abandon all hope for Monty Rice. And really, we probably should have already abandoned all hope for Monty Rice. But
were you surprised they didn't add I'm surprised that Christian Kirksey did not find his way on this team. I really thought that Christian Kirksey would be on this team. I mean, he's the former Texan, so you always got that, in there, the love incest between the Texans, the Falcons and the Titans going on. The Bears now. But I thought for sure, because he's just a reliable tackling machine. He's not dynamic, but he is better than any of the guys that they kept opposite of Azeez Al-Shaair. So I was kind of surprised. So were you surprised that that was the one spot that was untouched so far?
I'm a little surprised that it was untouched because I feel like they could get better there at inside linebacker, but I'm not sure Kirksey was the answer. Like, to me, Kirksey is in his 30s. He's like the opposite of what they're wanting to get in general, like, which is younger, faster, all that stuff. He's not fast. He's losing, ground. The fact that the Texans cut him, I think, tells you a little bit about where he's at in his career. Because, I mean, he's apparently a great locker room guy, great leader, all that stuff. But I feel like the Titans are like, we've got Kirksey at home and Jack Gibbons just because, he's, as far as leadership and, being able to get the defense in the right call and that kind of thing, I think Gibbons checks all those boxes for you. Again, he's not the most dynamic athlete either, but neither is Kirksey. So I'm not sure that Kirksey gives you anything that Gibbons doesn't at this point in his career, besides experience.
Were you surprised at Guerra and Matt Jackson, how that kind of like safety defensive back room shook out?
A little bit. Matthew Jackson, I guess I should have paid more attention to the fact that he was being used frequently as a gunner in preseason, because that is really like, and PK made a good point about that. When a guy's getting a ton of snaps at gunner in preseason, you should pay attention because that's a premier role on special teams, and they aren't going to waste those reps in preseason because those are guys that are going to be playing in preseason. So they go ahead and get them, they get those spots figured out in preseason because that's when you can actually tackle live, all that stuff. So Jackson got a ton of reps there. I would imagine we see him at gunner. Maybe Chris Moore takes the other one, or NWI, or maybe
wasn't Kendall
they have a lot
doing
of
some gunner?
Who?
Wasn't Kendall doing gunner?
Anthony Kendall, yeah, I think he did some gunning as well. So like they've got a lot of options there. I think they're going to have a pretty decent special teams unit from, basically from what they've kept, because they've got a lot of guys who can contribute on special teams on this roster. I mean, you even look at like Luke Gifford, Otis Reese. Otis Reese and Matthew Jackson are kind of interesting because they're the same size almost. Like Matthew Jackson's like 6'1", 209. Otis Reese is like 6'3", 214. They're like the same size guy, but obviously Reese is listed as a linebacker. Jackson's listed as a safety. But they're going to play a similar role, I think, they're both going to be key special teams guys for you. And they're both kind of like seek and destroy type, hitters. So it's going to be interesting to see how those guys are deployed.
By the way, we'll get to that later, but they're going to need that.
Who?
Seek and destroy.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. We'll talk about that for sure.
It's not as bad as what everybody says, but I think there's a reason why the stats don't look as bad as what everybody says. But Odukoya didn't make it, and Kevin Ritter didn't make it. They're moving the 3 tight ends only. Now, they did put in a waiver claim for – everybody keeps calling him a wide receiver, but I think the NFL has him as a tight end, Elijah Higgins, who was at the Senior Bowl. So I thought that was interesting that they put in a claim on him. So I asked you, Mike, because they kept Josh, they kept Chig, and they kept Trevon, which we all knew that they would. What does this say to you? That seems to be like the big question. That's the question they asked Rand Carthon today during the pressers. The question they asked Mike Vrabel. When you look at the 3 tight ends and 3 running backs and the 7 wide receivers kept, but now there's only 6 wide receivers currently on the roster with Kyle Phillips going to IR. Are people trying to read too much into it? Because we have seen the Tennessee Titans keep only 3 tight ends before and continue just to run the ball. So there's also, you could call these guys up, swap them out, do all the stuff. Are people reading a little too much into how those 3 positions shook out compared to what the offense is going to be?
Yeah, I think you should totally ignore the running back thing because they only had 3 running backs worth keeping. I know people got obsessed with Jack Patrick for whatever reason.
He signed a 2-year contract, Mike.
God, that was the most – I don't know. Someone was out there pushing that narrative because I heard it from way too many different people who would jump in the comments and say something about, hey, he got a 2-year contract. Did you know you got a 2-year contract? And I'm like, where is this coming from? Because it is nonsense. Like, you got zero guaranteed money. Like, it means nothing. You can wad up that second year and throw it away at any point. So it's literally meaningless. So I just, people got carried away with that, which was funny. But Jack Patrick was like, I mean, he's a straight ahead steamroller. Like, I thought he looked okay in preseason too.
Well, everybody called him like Derrick Henry 2.0. He's just like Derrick Henry. Yeah, okay.
Ridiculous.
Let's calm down there.
Yeah, he's like great value Derrick Henry with like a refurbished great value Derrick Henry. But it's yeah, I wasn't surprised they didn't keep him. He wasn't worth keeping. Like, Julius Chestnut, frankly, can back up both spots, like both the Derrick Henry role and the Tyjae Spears role. So there's no need for a fourth running back on this roster. So I don't think there's anything to read in there. As far as the tight ends go, though, I do think it's probably related to the Kyle Phillips injury more than anything. The fact that they kept 7 receivers initially, and of course now they only have 6 because they did move Phillips to IR. So I think that's why they initially kept 3 tight ends, and they can just call guys up. They can call up Odukoya, although they have to remove his international pathway exemption in order to call him up, which means they don't get that extra 17th practice squad player if they do that. So it may be Rader that gets the first shot as if they want to call up a 4th tight end. But I think maybe the thing to take away from that number is that they are pretty happy with Josh Wiley as a blocker to this point, and don't necessarily feel like they have to have another dedicated blocking tight end on the roster. So I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway, is that they feel like Josh Wiley is good enough that if they have to put him in there to block, that he can get the job done and be okay. Because Wesco's going to handle the heavy lifting, but I mean, if Wesco got hurt during a game, I feel like they could put Wiley in at Y, like that Y inline spot, and get by.
I wish I had bookmarked the tweet before the X feed refreshed, but because I cannot remember who said it, but there was a respectable Titans analyst / I think it was maybe one of the websites like A to Z or Titans Wire or something, but someone respectable, and because I was very taken aback, and then like it accidentally refreshed, called Josh Wiley a bust already. What do you think about that? Yeah,
that's way too early for that.
You may need to like look on Twitter and put Josh Wiley bust and see if we can figure that out. But I was very surprised by that, because it's like, already? Is it? And I think it's people that are still thinking that he is the reason why there are interceptions. Maybe he should have knocked them down. But Malik Willis threw horrible passes. But I'm not surprised that Josh Wiley made it. I am surprised. I mean, I was a 5 tight end kind of guy. And then apparently Lise Mack, he got injured. So he was waived with an injury designation. And then when I'm not
seeing anything on here.
I'll see if I can have to find it.
Yeah.
I am not making it up. I just don't know who said it. But they must have deleted it. Oh, they must have deleted it.
Well, somebody caught
someone
tweeting instead
probably
of
got
messaging.
Some replies that probably,
yeah.
And they must have deleted it. Anyway, when we saw Rader get cut, we were both like, "Oh, it's Odukoya, obviously, because obviously going to keep 4 tight ends," and then he didn't. So, like, that to me was one of the bigger surprises, that both of those guys got cut. We've already hinted around with Caleb Murphy and Sam Aquano and Thomas Rush, so I'm not going to really talk about that. But speaking of obsessions, Naquan Jones is back on this roster. Why? Because he is the definition of just a fat guy out there.
I mean, I like Naquan his first year in 2021 when he was here as a rookie. And I mean, I think he had a couple sacks that year. Like, he played well when they put him in the game. And so I liked him. But then last year, he was completely missing in action. Like, he would play, he would get on the field, he would do nothing. Like, he just was completely useless out there last year. Now, I understand apparently he was dealing with some sort of injury last season that may have, hindered him. But then he was hurt in preseason too. So, I mean, if he can't stay healthy, you can't stay on the field. I just don't know why him over someone like Kyle Pecco or someone like, um, Michael Dwumfor or someone like that. Guys that flashed more during the preseason than what Naquan did, because Naquan wasn't playing.
Yeah, I don't get it. Michael Dwumfor for sure, I thought was going to make it. I mean, him and Kyle Pecco at some point, but
And I mean, the good news is, like, all these guys that we're bringing up that we're surprised didn't make it are all on the practice squad now.
Right.
So, like, they're still with the team. So it's
and they're also like, they're not pivotal players.
No.
If it for at the moment, depending on other injury. But here's an interesting. I don't know why this happened. So Paul Karski is reporting off of a tweet from Teron Davenport. So Teron says the Titans are releasing offensive lineman Justin Murray, who is probably the second best depth player on the team in the preseason, to make room for the addition of Trevis Gipson, which I thought they were at 52 yesterday and they didn't have to drop anybody for Gipson. So that's kind of weird.
Well, I think the issue was, and I put this out last night actually, that it was an order of operations thing, because I don't think Kyle Phillips to IR processed until the end of the day. And I think
Gotcha.
they already had to make room beforehand or something like that. But I think it had to do with like order of operations. So.
And well, then Corey Levin is returning. He was spotted at practice. So now no idea what he's returning as, but Paul Karski says there is a procedural reason they cut him for a day instead of going straight to Murray. So that was interesting as well. Cutting Murray, I think, is a bad move. I do not agree with it. I didn't mind Corey Levin getting cut because, you have Xavier Newman-Johnson, you have Dylan Radins coming back, and you had Justin Murray. But to me, Justin Murray, if Chris Hubbard sucks in these first 6 games, was your guy that would go in to replace him before they get to NPF, before they get NPF back. I do not agree with this.
This is like the 6th thing, though, that makes me very confident that they believe Dylan Radins is going to be back like very soon, like back and ready to play. Because one, bringing him off the PUP made 0 sense to me at the time they did it, because I was like, it's only 4 weeks this year. Like, it's only 4 weeks if you go on PUP. So they have to think that Radins is going to be ready to play within the first 3 weeks of the season, or 4 weeks, I guess. Otherwise, it makes 0 sense not to pull him off. And then they move on from Murray, which is another thing. And it seems to me like they are setting themselves up to where Radins is going to get a shot at right tackle within those first 6 weeks. I think that's the plan. I think they are going to try to get him up to speed, and then maybe not by week 1, but maybe by like week 3, I think he's going to be challenging Hubbard. If Hubbard struggles at all early on, I think we could see Radins at right tackle sooner rather than later. And look, Radins might not give that job back if he plays well at right tackle. That might push Petit Frere to the bench, because Radins is, and I know Radins has had his issues, and I know people are all over the place with Radins as far as their confidence level. Radins is talented enough to keep NPF on the bench, to me. Like, he has got all the measurables. He can move. He looks the part. I mean, he's got a lot of the boxes checked from a talent standpoint. I think it's just putting it all together, technique, confidence, all that stuff. So we'll see like how his development comes, but he was already doing team. He did some teamwork today, which tells me like he's close. Like, he's close. And if his conditioning's good enough that he could play, I think he might be active week 1, which is insane to me, given that he tore his ACL in December. Do you think that
if he is active week 1, that he gets to start week 1, or do you think it's Chris Hubbard no matter what?
That's a good question, because I don't know that it's Chris Hubbard no matter what. I mean, Hubbard to me is like, you mentioned the definition of a jag. Hubbard is an absolute jag. Like, he's a replacement level guy. He should be like a 7th or 8th offensive lineman on most teams.
That's why I think that they should have kept Justin Murray over Chris Hubbard. I don't understand
I think Murray and
choosing
Hubbard
one
are
or
the
the
same.
other.
Yeah,
I
they're
think
the
Murray's
same.
better, not by much, but it's kind of like people wanting David Quessenberry back. To me, it's just like
He's just
they're
another.
kind
He's
of
another
the
Chris
same
Hubbard.
guy,
Yeah.
But like I'm gonna at least take the guy with the longer arms.
Yeah, true. But I mean, look, yeah, that's why I really think Radens is going to play within the first. I'll say by week 3, Radens is starting somewhere on the offensive line.
There you go. Do you feel? How do you feel about the depth at offensive line? Are you still like you hate it? You still hate it?
It's not good. I mean,
because the talk I heard on sports radio yesterday, and the reason I want to bring this up, of course, we've already kind of talked about Dylan Radens' place on this team, but they were going through scenarios. It was Jared versus Joe, and when they're talking about if Andre Dillard gets injured or Andre Dillard sucks, who would be the next guy up over at that position? And neither of them had confidence in Dylan Radens to be that guy. And they only brought up and talked about the Chargers game last year. But neither of them brought up the San Francisco 49ers game. San Francisco 49ers game 2 years ago in 2021, where he did play considerable time at the left tackle spot. So to me, I felt like before our conversation about Dylan Radens and right tackle and Justin Murray being cut, it's like, okay, well, to me, the offensive line depth is okay because as long as not like 5 starters are going out at once, the guys that they have to plug and play, like Xavier Newman-Johnson, like Jordan Ruse on the practice squad, like Dylan Radens, can work without having to move. If one guy goes down, without having to move the other 4. But they felt that was like, okay, well, if Andre Dillard goes down, you're in trouble because I guess you're putting Skoronski over there, then you're doing this and that. And I'm like, no, I would think that Dylan Radens would have been that guy.
That's kind of what I think too. I tend to think, and I mentioned this in my article at paulkarski.com this week. I think that Radens, his being pigeonholed as a guard was a Keith Carter thing. Like everything from Vrabel's comments last year to the fact that Vrabel now is openly talking about Radens in the mix at right tackle. But just when he was activated off of PUP, he mentioned him as, hey, we've got Hubbard there. We'll look at. I think he mentioned Murray, and then he mentioned Radens as options at right tackle. The fact that he's already talking about him there, I think it was a Keith Carter thing. I think Keith Carter had convinced himself and maybe had convinced Mike Vrabel that Radens needed to play inside because he couldn't hold up out at tackle, and that's why he ended up there. And I wonder if maybe Jason Hotelling feels different. It seems like he does, and I definitely think, if nothing else, Radens is your swing tackle. And to me, even if, say Radens plays at right tackle by week 3, like I'm saying, and then MPF returns in week 6 and Dillard's just struggling over at left tackle, I could definitely see Radens kicking over to left tackle, and you've got Radens at left tackle and MPF at right tackle. I wouldn't feel great about that scenario, but I feel like that's a viable option. And I feel like that's probably a better option than kicking Skoronski out there and then moving a guard in and all this other stuff. So I don't know. I guess to sum it up, I don't feel great about the offensive line depth, but I do feel better with it with Radens in the mix, because I do think Radens had played pretty well last year for the most part. Like he especially as a pass blocker, he didn't have major issues last season, whether he was at left tackle or left guard or right guard. He lined up several different places. He held up pretty well at all of them. So I feel better with Radens back in the mix, assuming he is like not going to have the major ACL, issues that we've seen guys have in the past. But it seems like both Radens and Landry are way ahead of schedule on ACL recovery this year. So,
anything else off the 53? Before we move to their additions and Trevis Gipson and Vildor, anything else? Oh yeah, and Nick Folk, obviously.
The only other things I guess I had from a surprise standpoint on the 53, I think I was a little surprised at Kendall over Guerrer and Stephen Jones Jr., but not surprised enough that it's like, oh, that's a huge deal. It was just kind of their order of the UDFA corners was different than mine. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Dowell making it on, I thought was good. I think that's a good sign for him. It seemed like he made a push there in that last week where he was getting some reps higher up in the food chain at wide receiver, and then obviously had a good preseason game to back it up, and has flashed enough that certainly he's worth keeping around and trying to develop. So I think it's encouraging that he's still on the roster to me.
Well, let's talk. Okay, let's talk then the additions of Gipson and Vildor. I thought Vildor was surprising because it was a waiver claim, which means he automatically goes on the 53. I thought that was interesting considering they kept Kendall, who at that point wouldn't you have? I feel like you could have done some different roster construction at that point because Vildor mainly plays outside, and that's where people thought Kendall would be lining up as well.
That's where Kendall lined up during the preseason.
Yeah, he's Vildor is okay. I mean, he's a okay waiver claim, and when you're getting picked up for a waiver claim, you're just basically adding depth at this point for certain positions, and that would be the one that I would think that like they have a lot of slot guys, but not a lot of outside guys, and that seems to be what the Vildor signing is for. Anything other than that you want to talk about on Vildor? I also feel like he was a little bit of a draft darling when he came out. Like I feel like I recognize that name and that the fact that he went to Georgia Southern as well.
He was definitely a draft darling. I mean, he fits the mold of a Titans player. He's physical. He's got good speed. I think he'll slot in. It'll be interesting where he slots in relative to Trey Avery, because I think Avery is your top backup on the outside. And I mentioned that if Roger McCreary at slot goes down, you're probably going to move Murphy Bunting inside rather than put Elijah Molden inside, because Molden's going to have a role on the defense. Like Molden's going to be your dime back for that big dime package that they run. Like they run it almost every third down. Like it's a regular staple piece. So Molden will have a role on this defense. He'll probably play, close to 30% of snaps if I had to guess. But I think if McCreary went down, I think you'd see Murphy Bunting slide inside, and then you'd have Trey Avery or Vildor slide into that other outside corner spot across from Fulton. So I think that's why they're going with an outside player there, is that Murphy Bunting is really your second slot, and then Molden would probably be your emergency kind of third guy that they drop into that role rather than one of the other corners. So to me, that it makes sense in that capacity, because Trey Avery I like as a developmental backup. He's also old. Like he's old. He was an old rookie last year. I think he's like 26. So everyone considers him like as a developmental guy, and
he's seasoned.
He's probably really not. He's probably just a backup at this point.
Yeah.
He's always going to be a backup. But yeah, I think Vildor and Avery is solid as depth at corner. I feel good about the corner depth overall.
So you came around to me feeling pretty good about the corner depth now.
Yeah.
I
actually felt decent about it going into the off season, but I feel really good about it
now. Trevis Gipson, the bane of autocorrect users is because Gipson with a B, and then Trevis and Travis.
Yeah.
I really like the signing, and I think it's crazy that he went through waivers unclaimed, and he was just basically essentially a free addition. And this feels like a younger version of the DeMarcus Walker signing last year, where you're getting a guy who has shown flashes in the past in the right system, and now he's coming back to the right system. And what are the odds that Trevis Gipson is going to do a lot of damage and then earn himself a second contract somewhere else like DeMarcus Walker did? Because that's what it seems like it's going to be. And speaking of depth, I mean, you got him and Autry who can now be your hybrid guys, but mainly Autry can maybe be on the DL and he could be at the edge spot. But like maybe he's the future Autry for this team. You know, like maybe he is that guy that's going to play that hybrid spot later on in the a couple of years from now. He'll still be on a Tennessee Titan. We'll be talking about all pro for Trevis at some point. But
I don't think he's got that kind of ceiling. I don't think he's got.
I don't know. He's pretty good. I mean, like if you look at the numbers, he's pretty good, and he was doubled a lot as well. So like he's going to be a little bit more free to roam around and do stuff. I do like the upside, and I don't even think it's really upside. I just like the floor of Trevis Gipson, and now the floor, this pass rush, man, it's gonna be nasty. Like I have such high hopes for it.
They've got a lot of different bodies they can throw into that pass rush now that are useful pass rushers, and I think it's worth getting excited about this one because I think the Gipson addition is great. I mean, like you said, I had talked all offseason about like DeMarcus Walker being a guy that they sneaky needed to replace and hadn't because DeMarcus Walker had 7 sacks last year or something like that. I think that's
you were very heartbroken over it.
He was really good for them. He was really good for them last year. And he left and they never replaced him really. I think Trevis Gipson replaces him. I compared the two last night on Twitter. If you look at the last 2 years combined, which, obviously like Gipson had a down year last year. You mentioned the double team rate. Like when he was across from Khalil Mack in 2021, he had great numbers. He had 7 sacks, and I think a lot of those were half sacks because PFF counts half sacks as full sacks, and he has 10 according to PFF. So
at least 3 half sacks.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe more. But I actually, this is a spot where I agree with PFF. I don't think you should have a half sack. Like if two guys both get to the quarterback and you've got to split it between them, both guys did their job well enough to get to the quarterback, right? Like, so I agree with giving a full sack to both guys, even if it makes the counting for like the team stats a little weird. But Gipson was very good at getting the passer opposite a dominant edge rusher in Khalil Mack. The Titans don't have a dominant edge rusher, but they do have a dominant interior rusher in Jeffrey Simmons, and they've got good edge rushers in Danico Autry, Harold Landry, Arden Key. That group of 4 edge rushers that you can throw into the mix, and obviously you can throw Autry inside, and he will be inside for a lot of third downs. You could throw Key inside. You can throw Gipson inside. They have so many different arrangements and just mixes of pass rushers that they can throw at offensive lines now. And they're going to be able to rotate these guys through because I think you could play Gipson on all downs. Like Gipson was a full-time starter for the Bears. And obviously like did not fit with Goober system, Eberflus.
I like
Gooberflus. But so he didn't fit his system, wanted to go back to a 3-4, gets to do that here. So scheme fit, he's going to come in. He's going to be a versatile piece for them. This is a great fit for the Titans. It's a great fit for Gipson because he'll be coached well. He'll be put in a position to make plays by Vrabel in this.
I'm sure he had a lot of suitors, so you got to think that like the chance to play with Vrabel was the why he chose here.
I think so too, because I think he would have gotten more playing time other places too. Like this is a deep edge group, and he's going to be probably the 4th one in the rotation.
He's going to be? You don't think he's going to jump Rashad Weaver?
I do think he'll jump Weaver, but I'm counting. And this is something I did a bad job on earlier. I should have been counting Autry with outside linebackers for a long time because it's where he's practicing now. Like that's his position group at practice. That's where they use him most of the time. So to me, it's Landry, Autry, Key, Gipson on the edge. And really it's Simmons and Tart on the inside that'll be your top 2 there.
But Gipson will be the first in the rotation because you got to think that Autry, Key, and Landry will play the bulk of the snaps together on the same at the same time, don't you think? Like that's how I kind of view it, because if you only got 2 on the defensive line, then technically your third defensive lineman in a 3-4 would be Autry.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be – so I think when they're in base, I think Autry will play inside, and you'll have Key and Landry out there as your outside linebackers. But they play so little base defense at this point. Like, they are almost always in nickel or dime. Like, the Titans more so even than other teams. Like, the Titans
I'm just saying, like, those 3 guys are considered starters.
Sure, yeah.
The first guy off the bench should be Gipson, not Weaver.
I agree. Yeah, I think Gibson's a better player than Weaver.
Yeah.
So in which Weaver's not bad. Like, Weaver's not like a bum or anything. He had 5 sacks last year, and he's shown flashes. But they've got like endless waves of pass rushers that they can rotate through there now. And I just think Mike Vrabel and Shane Bowen have to be like licking their chops about how they're going to arrange these guys on third downs and how they're going to be able to just fuck shit up. I mean, they can play Harold Landry off the ball some if they want to run some even fronts too. I mean, like, there's so many different things that they can do with this group now up front. I think they're going to give offenses complete nightmares with the way that they're able to rotate these guys, move them around. And besides, like, Azeez Al-Shire is a really good blitzer as well. So, like, throw him into the mix from time to time too. So
blitzes, corner blitzes. I mean, moving people off the ball. It's
really fun defense on paper. I cannot wait to see, because look, I think Vrabel has not gotten enough credit probably from most people, especially. It seems like maybe locally he gets even less credit than nationally, or maybe it's just the national people that I listen to, like Robert Mays and Nate Tice on the Athletic Football Show. They always rave about Vrabel and the unique and creative things that he does with his pass rush and with his pressure packages and things like that. And I mean, the Titans, I think among coaching circles, because they do talk to Mays and Tice talk to people in the NFL, and among coaching circles, Vrabel is viewed as like an innovator. He's a guy that people watch every offseason to try to see what's Vrabel doing with his defense. So I think schematically he is considered pretty advanced among NFL defensive minds, and a lot of teams are following the Titans in that regard, which is the opposite of how they're viewed on offense, which is a fair criticism. But defensively, I think the Titans do a lot of creative stuff, and they have more bodies now than they've ever had to be able to send to the quarterback. And look, if this defensive backfield cannot hold up with this pass rush in front of them, then fire them all into the sun and start new next year, because this should be a really good defense.
Mike, we both turned 38 this year. And another guy who is currently 38 is the Titans kicker, who looks like he's 58.
He
by
looks
the way,
way older than us.
What has happened? What happened? Like, we're all both born. All 3 of us are born in 85. How come we look so much younger than him? And I go back and I'm watching Home Improvement on Disney Plus, which still holds up. But at the time that he's on there, he is our age as well. Like, he's like 36 on season 1, I believe, and like turns 40 a little bit later. And he looks like he's already in his 40s. What? I don't get it. Like, this is just a perplexing, I guess, random offbeat topic before we get into the kicking situation. But just like, why? How does that even work?
I have no idea, because Nick Folk looks like he's like, I mean, he looks like a grandfather. Like, like he straight up looks like he's 55 years old. If you look at his picture on like Pro Football Reference and stuff like that, it's like, golly, this guy's in the NFL. It's wild, but good genes, I guess. I
guess so. I mean, I guess we just got I guess we ate right. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's all the red meat I eat. That's what I'm going to chalk it up to. Yeah. So he is the kicker. They traded a 2025 7th round pick for him. Not surprised that they ended up with Nick Folk in the slightest. I do think it is very interesting that they've also added Cade York to the practice squad, which today Ren Carthon talked about, that they have people on staff that can work with Cade York from the neck down and the neck up. We just have to hope that Craig Ackerman isn't either of those guys. But I want to talk about Nick Folk because the big knock on him is that is obviously his age and his touchback percentage. Now, there's a few things that go into the touchback percentage. Before I get into the actual touchback numbers, there's a few things that need to go into this. One is apparently that's how Bill Belichick likes it.
I disagree with that.
That's what people have said.
That. Well, then why
That's
did Jake
reports.
Bailey? Then why did Jake Bailey have a 60% touchback rate?
I don't know. Maybe it's just two different things. Now, the other thing is obviously colder weather up there can hurt that too. But let's get into the actual numbers because last year the Patriots' opponents' average start was 25.5. Okay, off kickoffs. You have to make sure you filter for kickoffs as the starting event, or you're going to get like 28 something and 29 something for both these guys. Titans' opponents was 24.3. So 25.5 versus 24.3. Now, I think my best guess is that obviously with a lower touchback percentage, that obviously the Patriots have a really fucking good coverage unit. And I think that's a staple of Bill Belichick, right? That he has that is the likely thing I take away, which brings us into the danger zone of having Nick Folk do the kickoffs because the Titans have a terrible coverage unit. And I think they're horrendous outside of like we have like 6 big bang plays every year and everybody gets all hyped with it. But I don't think this coverage unit is very good. And they're obviously rostering 2 kickers. But today, Mike Vrabel, maybe it's just coach speak. Maybe it's just that this is what he truly believes for now because he doesn't know how to handle kickers. Said today that there isn't going to be a kickoff specialist. This is going to be Nick Folk.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts, honestly. I mean, and look, Folk said in the locker room, I think PK asked him about it, he spent this offseason training to do kickoffs because I guess last year the plan was to have Bailey do the kickoffs, and then he was kind of thrown into it mid-season when Bailey got hurt in New England. So he was not expecting it. I guess he hadn't trained to do kickoffs or whatever. So he said he changed up his training this offseason to plan on doing kickoffs. I just think there's only so much you can do from a training standpoint when you're 38 years old and you didn't have the biggest leg to begin with. Like I went back and looked through his history of kicking off, and like a pretty good touchback rate generally in the NFL is somewhere around like 50 to 60%. Really good is like 70% plus. Out of Folk's 15-year career, he's hit 50% twice, and it was like 10 years ago. It's been a while.
Which 10 years ago was when they had the kick further back, right? Didn't they have the kickoff spot way further back? Because that's relatively
5 yards. I think they moved it 5 yards.
Yeah, which is odd that it was better before they moved it up.
Yeah, I mean, so he's never been a big touchback guy. And I know people have brought up that thing about like Belichick likes to kick short and cover, which I think I can't. The stats don't back it up at all. If you look at Jake Bailey's kickoff percentage over the years, the entire time he was with New England, he's 70 or like 60% plus every single year. Like, so it's not like if he was kicking it off against Belichick's wishes, I certainly don't think he would have been in the 60s every single year, or he would have been replaced. So I'm not buying this whole idea that Belichick told him to kick off short, and that's why he's at 9% touchback rate last year. I think he just doesn't have the pop to get it there. And look, the fair catch rate thing may help a little bit, which was included in my article as well. But the NFL modeled it based off of the college game and how that's affected. College kickers, NFL kickers are different, whatever. So it's not going to be perfect, but their model suggests that the return rate will drop from 38% league wide to 31%. So,
which we didn't even really see a big drop off in preseason, but that's probably because teams want to see what their returner is going to do.
Yeah, teams want to practice that element of the game because you can't practice that in like non-contact practices, you know. So, I think the kickoff thing is a real issue for Folk. I don't think he's going to be able to get many touchbacks. Now, if teams were fair catching, that's fine. And I will say that the Titans kick coverage unit, if you look at average return yards allowed, was actually pretty good last year. They were 4th in the NFL at like, I think it was, I'll have to find the percentage. I have it in the article somewhere. But so, yeah, if you want to go to paulkarsky.com and check out the percentage, it's there. But they were 4th in the NFL on kick return or average kick return allowed. And look, the Patriots gave up 3 kickoff return touchdowns last year. The rest of the entire NFL combined for 3. So, again, that goes against this whole thing that, like, Belichick told him to kick off short. I don't think Belichick's an idiot. And after 1 kick return touchdown,
I don't know. He cut both Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham.
But I think Belichick would be smart enough to stop kicking off short if he was getting kick return touchdowns against his kickoff coverage team all the time, which they were last year. So that was a major issue for them. So I think Folk is going to stress the kickoff coverage unit. And look, the Titans kept a ton of guys. We just started talking about like the kick coverage unit and all of the special teams guys that they kept. Otis Reese and, you know, Matthew Jackson and, you know, Anthony Kendall, all these guys that they're going to expect to be major special teams contributors, they're going to have to be good. Like they're going to have to be good. Ackerman's going to have to get his job done. And they're going to have to cover these kicks because they're going to be returnable kicks from Nick Folk. I will be shocked if he is all of a sudden a 70% kick, you know, touchback guy.
Okay, so I'm going through right now and cleaning up some data because there's a lot of kickoffs in the NFL from 2000 to 2022. Easy for me to say. So there's like 57,000 kickoffs that I'm having to clean up the data for and everything. But I was able to do some field goal kicking stats by age, similar for stackinginbox.com. It's not released yet, but it will be. But I did something similar to Derrick Henry and talking about superstar running backs and the age curve for superstar running backs. This is not fair to Derrick Henry if your data includes 50,000 Lamont Jordan running backs to figure out what actually Derrick Henry can do as the age goes on. Now, for the kickers real quick, there's 69 different kickers that had to meet a certain criteria. They had to attempt 20 field goals attempted. They had to at least play 6 seasons in the NFL. And they were this is only for age 22 through 41 because there's been a lot of people in the 40s, but we're doing this for Nick Folk purposes right now. 69 kickers met that criteria, 551 different kicks. So I want to go through and I'm only going to name the 38-year-old percentage. So 38 expected points added by the kickers that were 38 was the second highest in their range from 22 to 41 with 0.13, positive 0.13, which is really good. The average kick distance from that same edge range is the 6th highest, which is 37.5, which is the average kick distance per kickoff or on kickoffs. Points per game, 38 was the 4th highest with 7.26 points per game. And the field goal percentage was actually the highest at 86.7. So at 38, field goal kickers are making 86.7% of their kicks, but they're normally, remember, average kick distance is right at 37.5. But last year he was 4 for 5 for 50 plus. So are you okay with them sacrificing because they have an elite defense, we perceive, sacrificing kickoffs for field goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think field goals are generally more valuable. And if you, over the course of the season, make 85% of your field goal attempts instead of 70% of your field goal attempts. That may, I mean, I guess depending on when they occur, right? Like you can never control for when those kicks go through, whether it's the kick against the Giants last year to win the game, or whether it's the kick, when they're down 38-7 and, they kick a field goal to make it 38-10. Like those kicks have very different leverages for the results of your season. But if you're saying just spreading that across all kicks, I think you're more likely to win a game because of good field goal kicking than you are to win a game because of great kickoffs, great touchbacks. So I think that's a trade I'm happy to make. But I just think it's a concern that has to be mentioned with Folk. And look, the field goal kicking distance has been okay. Like you're not going to try a 60-yard field goal with Nick Folk, I don't think, right? Like he's his career long,
There's
I
very
think, is
few that you actually
54.
do that. One of the guys would have been
Right.
like Brandon McManus or Daniel Carlson, but those
Yeah.
guys aren't technically
Or-
available.
I think you could kick it with, you could kick with Tucker, obviously, Butker. Like, there's a few. And I think Cade York is a guy that, like, if he can get his head right, you would kick a 60-plus yard field goal with it. I think he made one from 59 last year in his first game to win the game. And then obviously fell apart after that. But York, to me, being on the practice squad is a great thing for the Titans because, look, we've seen it with older kickers before. Like, you don't know when it's just going to fall apart on them, right? Like, it could happen. Folk's been pretty consistent. He did wear down the stretch last year. And I think the other thing, and this was actually pointed out by a Pat's Pulpit article, their SB Nation site for the Patriots over there, that Folk's success rate as a kicker also declined when he was asked to start taking over field or kickoffs, which, as they pointed out, also coincides with when it gets really hard to kick, especially in a division where you're playing, at New England, at Buffalo, at the Jets in November, December, January. It's more difficult to kick in those scenarios than most anywhere else. So that could have also played a factor. But when he stepped in to start kicking off, his success percentage on field goals and extra points both dipped. And the other weird thing about Folk to me is, like, he was 58 during his time in New England since 2019. He was 58 of 58 on kicks under 40 yards, just automatic. But he missed 11 extra points during that time, which was like almost 10% of the extra points that he tried. So, like, it's just a bizarre stat to me that he was, like, not actually very good at extra points, but he was really good at short field goals, which an extra point is just a short field goal. So that's one of those, like, statistical anomalies that I think kind of throws off maybe some of the numbers with him. But I do think he'll be a reliable, accurate kicker under 50 yards. And I think, 50 to 55, I think you can, fairly confidently take field goals with him.
Well, I think
he's better than Randy Bullock, right?
Yeah.
It's a step in the right direction.
Do we? Am I missing anything? I don't think I missed anything.
I think that covers it. Yeah. Also, the 2025 7th round pick could not give a fuck about it.
Oh, yeah. Are there people up in arms about it?
Well, the people get mad because you had to trade a pick for a 38-year-old kicker, and it's like, yeah, but it's like a future 7th rounder that is, like, I mean,
you can't just go with Cade York, right? Like, and expect to get similar results points wise,
right,
that you would from Nick Folk. So that's why you have to spend the 7th round pick, because he wasn't going to make it to you. And someone else was going to trade for him.
I absolutely love Cade York being on the practice squad because, like, this is the perfect mix of, like, you've got the reliable veteran, but you've also got the young guy with some upside that, like, I mean, Cade York was top high school kicker, top college kicker for his class. Like, he's been really, really good for a long time, and then had 1 year. And look, I mean, it's the difference of, like, 2 or 3 made kicks between him being run out of Cleveland and him being, a hero in Cleveland, right? Like, that is the fine line that it is. And I do think that the Titans have a lot of resources from, like, a mental coaching and stuff like that. We've heard a lot of the players talk about that. We've heard about Vrabel talking about that. I think that is something that they do put an emphasis on, and hopefully that can help Cade York maybe build back his confidence, getting some time on the practice squad, getting to work with Nick Folk. And maybe you end up getting a really good young kicker out of this whole thing for 2024 and beyond.
Well, the one thing the Titans will make sure of is that they have a kicker on the practice squad with some basic ass bitch name. We got Tucker, Cade, Caleb, Trey. I mean, come on.
They do like that. They do like that mold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam.
They love it. Sam.
Well, Sam Picken.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Sam Solomon too. Yeah.
Yeah, they got to have one. You know, they just got to have one kicker like that on the end. There is a question on Robbie and Rexroad that I want to ask you, and it's an overarching, doesn't have to be Titans or NFL related. And we're going to close the show with this. I'm going to tell you what I answered to give you time to think about it.
All right.
They asked, it was Nick Keyser, the producer. They asked if you could be the general manager of any sports franchise in a given point in time, what team would it be and what would you do? Why are you choosing that time? I went and said I would love to be GM of the 1998 Tennessee Titans when they passed on Randy Moss for Kevin Dyson. I think that would be a pivotal moment in this franchise's history.
Gosh, so for me, I'll say I would love to be the GM of give me the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had right after they got SGA and they've got like a bajillion picks over the next few years. Like they can turn that roster into like something amazing. Like just give me the resources to build as much as I want. Just be loaded with resources.
So basically, you could, if you're NFL terms, you'd be the Cardinals.
Yeah. I would love to be in what's his name, Monty Austin Ford's shoes right now.
Interesting, very interesting. That will do it for us. Football and other F words. Thank you for joining us.
Wait.
Oh.
But without the Kyler Murray contract, yeah, I would not want the Kyler Murray contract. So
I don't know how you're going to get rid of it. So you'd have to almost go back to the Steve Keim days and then somehow survive something
contract, but then end up with all the draft assets that they did.
That will do it for us. Football and other F words. You could join us every week. We go live. Also, you can also join us at Bluegrass Beverages. You can join me and Stoney Keeley. We will be at Bluegrass Beverages starting at 12, but we'll be setting up, going live at 12:30. We'll be there for a little bit of time, promoting the event, giving you a good look of what's going on around the event and everything. Food trucks, breweries, join us. Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee, celebrating 50 years of service, which is insane. Basically, Nick Folk looks like Bluegrass Beverages' age. That's what he looks like. Yes. You can follow him on X at Mike Herndon NFL. You can follow me on X at FWordsPod. StackingTheInbox.com is where you can read all of our work, or my work, and Stoney's work, and Trey's work. Released a new stat, H curve for superstar running backs, where it details and tries to predict. We'll see if it actually comes true. Tries to predict Derrick Henry's season as he enters in this age of his life. And paulkarski.com for all of Mike's works every Wednesday. This has been Football and Other F Words. And you, oh, wait a minute. Before you go, we still got a lot of people watching. 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Turn on notifications. 440 Sports. Me and Braden, a football show. We're going to be talking about his perspective on the Titans news. And we're also going to be talking about SEC Week 1 football, baby. It's back. Yes. Football games to talk about. But this has been football. Tonight. Yeah. I got UConn. I took the spread 14.5 in favor of UConn. So, yeah, there we go. UConn. No, it's UConn versus Washington State or NC State.
Oh, no, I was talking about Florida, Utah.
That's tonight too? I thought that was tomorrow. No, there you go. Tonight. Are you sure?
Thursday, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe. I thought it was Friday. Either way, football and other F words, and you have just been effed.